Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us today for the Economic Times Unwired webinar powered by Secular Technology. The theme for today's webinar is data security in Microsoft 365 and beyond. I am Anirban Ghoshal, your host for this session. In today's data-centric world, your data is your business. Data is the key to delivering rich, personalized experiences in a rapidly changing digital world. Data-driven digital transformation is no longer just a strategic initiative, but a new way to work, interact, and do business together with customers, employees, and the larger part of the world. With the greater part of the workforce working remotely, cloud platforms helps reduce collaboration challenges but increases security challenges. The most immediate concern organizations need to overcome is the security of the sensitive data and intellectual property residing on the cloud. Organizations lose control of their data once the data is downloaded and reaches remote employees, partners, or any other third-party network. Every enterprise is using Microsoft 365, but not many know that security and privacy risks of the data stored and shared using the service. Every cloud service provider, including Microsoft, is susceptible to breaches. For enterprises, however, the cloud breaches always mean a breach of the data. In this session, some of the industry experts are going to discuss ways of removing dependency on security of cloud services for enterprises. But before we proceed with the panel discussion, I urge you all to fill the quick survey post this session where you are eligible to win exciting prizes worth $100. Yes, you heard it right. Fill in the survey and you will win exciting prizes. With that, let me introduce you to our speakers for the day. We have with us today Mr. Abhishek Bansal, who is the Chief Information Security Officer of Max Life Insurance, Mr. Dilip Panjwani, who is also the Chief Information Security Officer and IT Controller for L&T Infotech Limited, Mr. Deepak Bhosle, who is the General Manager, IT of Asian Paints, and Mr. Vishal Gupta, CEO, Secular Technology. And to moderate this wonderful session and these panelists, we have Sony Anthony, partner, KPMG India. Without further ado, I would now like to hand over the session to Sony. Thank you, Sony.
Thank you, Anirban. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you, Anirban. Good afternoon to all of you, and a very warm welcome to this esteemed panel for a conversation on data security in O365 and beyond in the new normal, or we may say the neo normal. COVID-19 has completely changed the way we work. Projects which probably took years in implementation have now been driven during the COVID period in weeks. We have seen companies have taken security risks that they might have never accepted in normal circumstances just because they wanted businesses to be enabled with minimum impact during the COVID period. We have seen hackers or organized crime groups have shown themselves ruthless, and they've been very entrepreneurial in exploiting fear and uncertainty. They have been repurposing phishing and attack infrastructure to build COVID-19 specific fake websites and scams. I think the risk teams in financial firms have become increasingly concerned about just how many security waivers were granted in the rapid response to a COVID-19 implementation. In particular, there's a lot that's gone, including insider threats are worrying as well, from call center workers who are working from home, stealing customer card information, to investment traders who are colluding just because there's absence of their superiors' watchful eye, right? In other business models as well, things are changing very fast. They're expected to embrace digital channels, cloud services, and for sure embed home working. The new paradigm of work in 2021 and to be adopted for some time in future will set in motion a couple of new areas and additional focus for multiple stakeholders. Right from, let's say, cyber response to resilience and cyber insurance for an organization, zero trust security and cloud shift to the network, and privacy to an organization, its employees, and its clients. To know more, let's get into a conversation specifically on the cloud shift, its benefits, its concerns that organizations are currently addressing. And I would like to then take on the first question And I think the first question is to Mr. Deepak. Mr. Deepak, developing a cloud security strategy can help organizations clarify their security and compliance posture. And continually refining the strategy can help them stay up to date on emerging threats. Therefore, having a strategy in place can also help prevent overspending or misspending on cloud security controls. What do you think are the key elements for developing a cloud security strategy? I think my question is to Mr. Deepak.
Uh, thank you, Sony, and warm welcome to my fellow panelists. I'm really looking forward at a very insightful discussion. Coming to your question, Sony, if you look, cloud security for me is going to be a subset of an overall broader security which an organization would have. So every company would have their own information security strategy, which broadly hinges on three pillars, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. And I guess these are the three tenets on which people base their controls. And these controls are largely based on the way we see it at Asian Paints would be on how data gets stored, how data moves, who accesses data, how is data accessed, and how is data processed. So on these five principles is where we go about defining a security strategy. And cloud security in that sense would be a subset of the broader security strategy which we would have. Things have been very good for us when we were on-prem, So a lot of things right from the end end device to the app on the data center. When it is all on-premise, things are a little to that extent manageable and very much in control. But with the advent of the cloud, and for just would like to state that with cloud coming in, there is a shared sense of responsibility, which means that the model which you adopt on the cloud brings in a certain sense of responsibility on either side. For example, if you're on the SaaS model, the entire security paradigm shifts onto the provider of that solution, and you're responsible for the data security and the access of it. And if you're on the IaaS side, you'll probably from the hypervisor upwards, you'll be responsible for the security. So that's how you need to calibrate on your own cloud strategy and how you're going to have a cloud security strategy based on how you go about your cloud journey. So for me, the five elements which I would want to pin down whenever I put in my cloud security strategy, and which would be evolving in that sense, would be first, I would want to stress on the access, the identity and access management. That's pretty critical for me in terms of being in the strategy. Second would be in terms of what are the mechanisms available for detecting intrusion? How good are they? How modern are they? Is there the element of AI ML which will help you do it faster and better? Third would be in terms of the network security. In terms of, is there a proper layered security there? What is the surface leakage which is getting addressed? Are there the principles of zero trust networks embedded within the framework? The fourth one would be in terms of how much of it does it allow me to respond whenever there's an incident. So the incident response mechanisms is the fourth one. And fifth, and the most important one for me would be the data security, wherein I would really be very conscious about what sort of encryption, what sort of key strategy I would have to ensure that my data is always in that sense reliable. There is a certain amount of integrity to that data. So these are the five elements I would be focusing on whenever I go about with my cloud security strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Deepak. I think in essence what you were saying is, while you look at your CIA from a controls perspective, you also have to look at, let's say, data stored, moved, and processed. Keeping this as a subset, look at the overall picture of cloud security with five key elements, which is primarily access. You're also looking at, let's say, detection by way of new technologies like AI, ML. You're also looking at network security, right? And we're looking at the response capability and obviously the data security, which is the most important. These are the key elements and structure that you put in to design what is my cloud security strategy for the organization. I think very well put, Mr. Deepak. What I'd like to do is I'd like to get on to the next question to Mr. Dilip. And this is more on, let's say, distinction. Nowadays, cloud computing servers are becoming gullible to data breaches. We have seen that quite a few times in the news as well. Cloud infrastructure security solutions, they help in ensuring that data like sensitive information and transaction is protected. This also helps in preventing third parties from tampering with the data that is being transmitted, right? So the point I'm trying to check here is, are organizations making a clear distinction between security of the cloud infrastructure and security of data on the cloud? So between security of, let's say, the cloud infrastructure itself and security of data on the cloud, is there a clear distinction, and what are organizations doing around it?
Hi, Sony. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining this session today. And yeah, to answer your question, Sony, I believe this is something which is a point of concern and something that not all organizations fully understand today. Everybody is focusing more around doing the infrastructure and application related security controls and considering them just like their crown jewels in their data centers. If you have that covered in, you have kind of mostly tick boxed everything around, and therefore you are more protected in that sense. But when it comes to the cloud aspects, there is a lot of shared ownership between you as well as the cloud service provider, as well as the other ecosystem partners whom you engage with to protect your cloud environment. And they have access to that infrastructure also. So there is authorized access. The third-party supply chain risks do apply in that kind of scenarios. There are people who would be not your organization folks who would have access to the underlying systems. And therefore, the data is at risk for exposure due to human errors or insider threats or external threats. Hence, despite protecting the cloud infrastructure as a whole, you still have to look at the data aspect, which Deepak very rightly pointed out. That is a very, very critical element as part of your cloud strategy. Because without that, you are just leaving your entire crown jewels inside a physical perimeter, which is called the cloud. But after that, once person breaches that section or has an authorized way to get inside, then there is no more controls after that.
Okay, so in a sense, what we're saying is, while organizations today are looking at only the infra and their app from a controls perspective and looking at security around it, which is more infrastructure oriented, you also need to look at your crown jewels and the data within the crown jewels. But whose responsibility is it? I mean, I heard you speak, it's a shared responsibility. So security of data versus security of the infrastructure. While I understand you're saying security of the infrastructure, the cloud service provider takes care of, security of the data of the crown jewels is whose responsibility? Is it for the enterprise or is it the cloud service provider?
Only the enterprise, nobody else.
Thank you. That's a dot. Enterprise. I think I'll move on to my next question, and please feel free to join in and provide inputs for other questions as well.
Sony,
anybody else has any viewpoints on this specific?
yeah. Hi,
Yes.
hi, this is Vishal.
Yes,
I think I'll do a little bit of a combination of what Deepak and Dilip mentioned earlier. I think the clear distinction between infrastructure security, which is the security of the cloud application, the cloud network, and the cloud devices, and all of that, should be fair and square with the cloud service provider. If an enterprise is using a cloud service and then has to recruit an army of security engineers to secure that cloud service, then to me, the purpose of using that cloud service is lost, right? Why should I recruit engineers and set up processes to secure Microsoft's systems? That is Microsoft's responsibility, and that should come as a part of the cloud service itself. My only responsibility as a cloud consumer should be to make sure that my data remains secure when it is in the cloud or outside, on premise, on devices, and so on. So the place where I see security going is that infrastructure security is already and will continue to move as a responsibility on the cloud service providers. And the only way to govern that is by certifications and transfer of liability, right? If Microsoft messes up, Microsoft should pay, right? And that's true for Salesforce and everybody else in the cloud service provider world. And as a consumer, my responsibility should only be to secure the data, which belongs to me.
So Vishal, I like the way tangentially you're bringing a point here. You're basically saying that security of the infrastructure and security of the data should be on the cloud service provider.
No, I'm saying infrastructure is the cloud service provider, so that should be the cloud service provider's responsibility, and data should be the enterprise responsibility. I'm making a very clear distinction, and all the investments that today enterprises are making to secure the cloud infrastructure, in my opinion, defeats the very purpose of buying a cloud service. Why should I secure somebody else's network and somebody else's applications when that should come as a part of the infrastructure itself?
Sure. Thank you for that viewpoint, Vishal. I'll just move to the next question. Is cloud security a responsibility of the cloud provider or the enterprise customer? Now, we said that it is more shared where we have to look at it, but I see that there are many hybrid models also coming in. There are people who say that, and you just brought out a point saying that why will I want to put an army of people to secure my crown jewel if the cloud service provider is hosting it and there are SLAs around it and there's accountability around it as well. I'll put SLAs and penalties and make sure that that is addressed by the cloud service provider itself. So the aspect of this shared responsibility of the cloud service provider or enterprise customer, that is a viewpoint I'd like to get from you, Vishal, if you can give that.
I don't think it should be a shared responsibility. I'm using a service, Mr. Microsoft, Mr. Salesforce, whoever is the service provider. The security is not a layer on top. It has to be built into the cloud's infrastructure itself that you are providing me. So the security of the cloud infrastructure should not be in any way the consumer's responsibility. It is the responsibility of the service provider. It is the same way that as an individual user, for example, let me talk about the individual who's using Skype, right? I use Skype as an individual, right? Now, I cannot set up an army of people to figure out how secure is Skype as a communication mechanism, right? That I'm assuming that Microsoft will take all the measures that it can to make sure that Skype communications are secure. The same thing is for enterprises, right? It has to be fair and square, the cloud service provider's responsibility. However, the security of the data that I store in the cloud, that liability I cannot transfer to the cloud service. I still have to make sure that data that is going to the cloud is secure, access policies are governed right, and so on. These are all the challenges that can happen even with a secured cloud infrastructure. Right? So that responsibility is mine.
I'd like to lean on Mr. Abhishek. I'm sure in his insurance sector, there could be something similar for this question. What's your view, Mr. Abhishek?
So thanks, Tony. And more or less, I kind of agree with my fellow panelists in terms of how this entire cloud security paradigm is looked into. I kind of beg to slightly differ from Vishal. I mean, because it definitely is a shared responsibility model, given basically what it's consuming, right? In any of the cases, right, whether I go in for a complete SaaS or whether I go in for a complete infrastructure, data is still my ownership, right? That is something which is never going to be outsourced to anybody else. I think same thing was mentioned by Dilip as well. But when it comes to, let's say, maybe the other security controls, right? If you see the typical narrative, even from any of the cloud service providers, I'm going beyond, right, without taking any of the names, they would typically say that, no, we have services for different areas, whether you call it as identity, whether you call it as monitoring. I mean, they will have services for damn everything, which you also have in today's infrastructure, whether you are on or you're on-prem, right? I mean, the stack remains the same, the fundamental remains the same. It's the consumption pattern style. And definitely when you're using myriad of technologies, which is like a hybrid structure for most of the, let's say, maybe organizations who are there in business for the last 5 to 10 years, right? Somebody who is starting afresh or new in the last 2-3 years, definitely they may have a complete cloud model. However, if you go beyond, I mean, definitely they will have, I mean, right from mainframes to, cloud native applications. So they will have actually a variety of infrastructure to manage. Data is definitely, a responsibility of the enterprise. So the strategy elements, they may be broader and they may be driven by any of the, parameters, whilst you want to go for digitization as a journey for whatever reason, right? But the fundamental thing is how the control structure with the roles and responsibilities is defined, right? Whether it needs an investment on your side or whether it needs basically a control in terms of a contract, because you have a limited responsibility share with respect to contracts. How often do we see, I mean, it is a broader vendor risk management topic, not pertaining to cloud alone, but how often do you crystallize liability clauses in any of the contracts, right? So contract is one part of it. You can still have those things built in, but your comprehensive security strategy, I think, should tie first to your entire digital strategy, right? You need to really see how actually the speed of things matter, right? I mean, I would slightly differ cloud security strategy, model, framework, whatever name you want to give it, vis-a-vis to what we are or what we have been doing on-prem, right? I mean, setting up an infrastructure on cloud has a different shelf life and a different timeline vis-a-vis to when you are doing it on-prem. Right? So and so forth. Your security strategy should also be able to deal with these changes. I think there is definitely an onus on the organization. Whilst I, in principle, agree definitely, with respect to what is being managed, definitely as a product. And it goes with any product, right? If I'm buying any product from any security OEM also, there are certain things, if I'm buying it, I believe definitely they will come and give me those features. I will not actually do a double check whether they have those features or not before kind of I install. So that's my limited take on it.
Thank you on that, Abhishek. I think the 2 points that you brought up was, one is data is owned by the enterprise and it is their responsibility, and second is the contracts needs to be a little more crystallized when we are having contracts defined with, and it should be part of our strategy itself.
Contracts need to be crystallized. Sony, I think the moot point which can be iterated for the on one part, right? They actually give you some teeth with respect to if something goes wrong. But definitely the onus of the controls, even when you are talking to or negotiating with your CE, whosoever it is, still lies on the organization. So one needs to dig down and look into the fine prints of the contracts also when you're thinking you are taking a SaaS and everything is going to be managed by a CSP and you need to take care of data alone.
Got it. Yeah. So I'll move on to the next question. We know we are getting into the second wave of COVID. I'm not sure how long that will last. But from the perspective I see is COVID has ensured many organizations adopt cloud tech within a very short span of time. People have been taking years for probably some implementation in their organization because of, let's say, challenges from procurement or, let's say, lead times for technologies. But if you look at it, in the COVID period, people have enabled technology to such a level. Today, we are having this conference, which was probably it would have been there, but not necessarily all conferences would have been on a webinar session itself, basically to meet business objectives. And my question is to Mr. Deepak. Question is, have we done enough to meet security objectives prior to the shift? I'm sure during the COVID period, we were all running around trying to get business enabled, get the tech enabled, and therefore looking at the cloud service providers. What type of rigor would have been put in place during a normal implementation with respect to security and privacy? Have we done that during the cloud shift?
Yeah, so there was an interesting stat which I had read recently. It was about how ready are companies post what they've seen in COVID. And the survey surprisingly said that 70% of the companies still do not have adequate security infrastructure to conduct, to have a remote way of working for their employees. And this is a survey done in the US. So you can clearly see that it would probably be far worse in other parts of the world. When COVID happened, I think the CIOs were all in a frenzy. I used to interact with a lot of CIOs, CISOs then. We just went about doing what was important in terms of getting them connected, and security concerns were still not really getting addressed by sitting across the table and understanding whether this is really creating some loopholes. People have gone about and given remote access desktops to machines in the local area networks which had USB access, but then the whole data security was at risk. People have gone and enabled access and given access which were not which were going against the GRC controls. So all these things have happened, and in this process, a lot of security loopholes were created, and I'm sure that was a time when the hacking community was active, and I'm sure there will be a lot of cases where people have already gone and created sweet spots, sweet trojans, which probably are sitting in a lot of corporates, which might get activated in some point of time. So clearly, a lot of security has. If you see, and what I keep hearing, people do not give as much due as they should have given before we got into this entire COVID thing. Post COVID, I think a lot of awareness has happened. A lot of urgency is being shown The boards are asking a lot of questions in terms of how secure. That's one question which came up in nearly every board. How have we enabled remote working, and how confident are you of the security measures taken? So this is one question which is getting posed in front of all CISOs and CIOs. So for me, in that sense, people who had a well-defined security strategy, which had sponsorship right from the CEO from the beginning, and who are pretty forward and laid down a security strategy, had all the 5 elements of access, which I just mentioned earlier. And that was the case with us as well, since we were on the journey of entire information security since 2012, where a conscious effort was taken to roll out the security program. During the COVID time, it was just about while our infrastructure was sized to a certain level of people working remotely before COVID, during COVID, we just had to scale it up. And that was more about buying those additional licenses and get going with it. So people who have been constantly investing in security and have been forward about its adoption as a hygiene measure, I think were the least disrupted during the COVID period. The others are now learning it the hard way, and I guess there's a lesson hard learned.
Thank you, Deepak. So I'll rephrase this question a little bit to Mr. Dilip. So while we understand, right, and people have moved forward with implementations and things like that, now that we have realized, are we taking a step back and re-evaluating those connections? For example, our local user who was on the local area network with respective VLANs and firewalls has moved to his house. Our technology or applications, which was business related applications, which was in the DMZ or the internet network, has moved to a cloud infrastructure, which means my user is outside, my tech is outside, the hackers are outside. So now from a control perspective, while we have realized this, what are organizations doing today, especially when they are being asked by boards? For example, it's become a boardroom agenda. And like Deepak brought out, saying that confidence of remote working. We have been questioned on the confidence of remote working. So Mr. Dilip, I'd like to get a view from your point as to what is your thoughts on this?
So Tony, at least from an LTI perspective, when I look at from our organization, how we stood at a point in time when the COVID pandemic hit globally across all organizations, our situation was slightly different. We had already migrated all our 86 plus applications completely to 2 years ago, 2018. So we were having no applications or data sitting actually on premise. It was only infrastructure applications, security applications up to a certain extent, which were actually on premise because of the nature of our business of ODCs and EDCs for our customers. Enterprise applications and the data all was completely between a combination of IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS across Azure, AWS, and GCP. So we've been on the complete hybrid environment and cloud-first technology organization-wide. So when the pandemic really hit us, it was not much of a pain for us at that point of time for enablement perspective. Our users were already enabled and comfortable with anytime, anywhere access to LTI data and systems. In addition to that, what we had to look at was we had already some programs which were part of our enterprise security journey for the financial year. And that just got kind of, I think, pumped up ahead of time to help some enablements much faster pace and adoption at a faster pace in order to help business get that confidence and enable them at a faster speed that we had to really get them for remote working. So for example, we moved it from next-gen antivirus to the EDR solution. We moved into managed threat hunting services. We moved in with certain aspects with regards to getting risk-based monitoring for user identity, access, and user behaviors. Those aspects are already part of our programs. Some got really bumped up ahead of time, at least a couple of quarters in the journey. And that kind of, I think, helped us get more confidence to allow people to really move in at that pace. At the same time, while I agree with Deepak, like many organizations did definitely go ahead, and so did we also have to take some hard decisions to allow certain exception approvals at that immediate moment to allow the next hour based immediate access to all services and ensure that nothing goes disrupted at any point of time. But then we had a conscious monitoring and understanding of where we were at that point of time. we had parallel monitoring enabled to ensure that whatever those accesses or risks were opened up, they were monitored for if there was any deviation or any kind of traffic being seen in a anomaly perspective. Additionally, we already had identified, while the enablements for the organization are in place, we had a parallel squad team defined between IT and information security and applications combined to do a deep stick once again at periodic checkpoints, say 6 weeks down the line, say another 12 weeks down the line, and keep on checking whether we had our controls getting reinstated back in place. The exceptions taken down after the controls are put in place, users are enabled, and everything is working smooth. And get everybody back to their normal course of behavior within the policy realms, rather than keep it open for too extended period of a time. And this all was being monitored continuously by our top leadership, because being a services organization, for us, security, risk, compliance, and privacy are top priority for all our customers for which we do business. And hence, it does impact from not only an enterprise compliance perspective, but also from contractual compliance perspectives.
Thank you, Dilip. I think you brought out a note here on security and privacy. That's something which I like. And I think I'll tune my next question to, while we have organizations who moved on to the cloud, right? There are some organizations who have not moved on and they're still contemplating. Basically, and I'll get Mr. Abhishek's view on this. What are the specific security, privacy, and control concerns that have kept organizations from adopting cloud services? Just leading on what Dilip said.
So, Sony, I personally believe that this is more of a question, which is legacy question now. I mean, people are far more mature today, and across the board, they are somewhere getting into this conclusion that they have to go to cloud. It's the question of when, right, and how. There are definite benefits which definitely cloud movement to cloud really entails, right? Whether it is scaling up, which comes in directly, many people, and that's where I think COVID actually brought this to light, are seeing adoption to cloud because of the nature of, let's say, maybe high availability and multi-zone services being provided by the cloud service providers as really as a natural business continuity or a resilience mechanism also, right? I mean, one is more to do with the scalability and how you can do it. And that's what is pushing not only moving your or migrating your applications to the cloud, but also actually leveraging a lot of new native functionalities for movement to the cloud. Why I give all this premiere to you is that there are many hidden concerns which used to be there, which used to prohibit, if I may say, the cloud aspirants, quote unquote, right, to move to the cloud. Right, there were a lot of regulations which used to prohibit the data localization, and now you will see CSPs actually having their hosting centers within India. They're talking about all of this, and they have established contracts in put space. So your data localization, and whilst we do have Indian Act, Indian Rules 2011, which talk about privacy, we are still awaiting actually a full-blown Personal Data Protection Act similar to GDPR or likewise to have those granular concerns with respect to data privacy. Whilst RBI and IRDA are few of the regulators who are still who have still managed to actually include some prescription around these aspects as far as the regulations is concerned. But we still don't have a full-blown data privacy regulation. So primarily it is driven still from the regulations across the globe. And those are the organizations actually who are dealing with multiple countries, and they don't have really this problem of data localization in that case. As far as security is concerned, I think it is more of it's again more of a cultural thing, right? And more of a mindset that when you are within your four walls, you are more secure, right? When everything is housed internally, then you are more secure. I think that notion is definitely getting hit and has been challenged big time by COVID resumption, right? People were forced to actually work from home. The companies who never thought of actually that they will be having their workforce, their vendors, partners, now they are actually doing so, and you can see the repercussions actually in the real estate for that matter. Those notions are being shed whether I will be more secure on-prem versus on-cloud. The third bit, which used to be there, is that I do have a lot of investments which I have made already for my security of my on-prem, let's say maybe infrastructure applications, so on and so forth. Now people are also understanding, awareness around these concepts are increasing, that know how different services are actually available to you from different cloud service providers at fraction of cost, which you can have and implement and have the same security solution. The only thing is that definitely there is a learning gap, there is an awareness being bridged. I think given these three factors, the notions which used to be there before, that know whether I should go to cloud or keep everything on-prem, I think that's where that the tussle is actually going down, and we are seeing more and more of cloud adoption. And you will see more and more cloud aspirants moving more workloads to cloud, if not today, near future.
So that gives me a perspective that businesses are happy because the enablement is coming. There's a lot of availability. There is resilience. The CFO's office is happy because there's a lot of cost optimization is coming in. So I'm sure on a scale of 1 to 10, the business and the CFOs are probably at a 7 or an 8 scale rated. I would like to know, and we have two CISOs on this panel, what is the rating that the CISOs are feeling now that we have moved to the cloud?
So I would give the same rating, Sony. I would not give a lesser rating than a CFO. In fact, I think you were a little conservative in giving a rating from a CFO or a business side. They would like agility to the hilt, and they would say 9 or 10 for that matter of fact. And a CISO today, who is well aware of these concepts, I think 7 or 8 should be decent enough. It's only a matter of time whether you have the right investments for cloud security or not. Right? People are moving to DevSecOps. People are moving and talking about how do I take care of my workloads within the cloud. I mean,
so that's
where it is. Yeah.
If I look at, let's say, if I read the newspaper as well, I see a lot of organizations not having challenges with respect to availability. For example, I don't see a downtime because of, let's say, a cloud infrastructure broke down from an availability perspective. But I see a lot of data breaches, security issues around organizations. So will that not give a different view?
I would say it will be wrong to actually connote those data breaches to cloud service providers or cloud. I mean, no, that will be unfair actually on our part to give that direct connotation. Said that, I don't deny that there has been a lot more breaches, especially in last 1.5 years. But that's also pretty much where the energies are channelized. Look, if I mean, as a CISO, I mean, most of us are actually thinking it more so how we have to safeguard the organization. Look at it from a hacker's perspective, right? He is thinking that now more and more organizations are doing remote working. So definitely their controls will be relaxed. Now they have all time and energy in the world to kind of look into it. So definitely the boundaries are porous, and porous for many organizations who did not have those kind of initial investments or the mindset to go about, right? And that actually gives in an opportunity for a hacker to utilize it. So this is no brainer that why we are seeing more and more of these. But I think it would be unfair if we link the two, that it is all because of the cloud or movement of the cloud.
I'm not, but I'll just get Mr. Dilip's view on this. While he said safeguards that needs to be put in place, right? So, and we spoke about these recent data breaches. So do the recent breaches at major cloud service providers make you question your decision, which we already answered, right? But what measures are organizations taking to protect enterprises against these sort of breaches? You could say it could be technologies, it could be additional processes, but I just want to have that view of what are we doing about it while we see these things are going through. Mr. Dilip? I think we lost Mr. Dilip.
Sony, we've lost Mr. Dilip. He's joining back in. So you can have the question asked to someone else.
Yeah, I'd like to have views from anybody else here. Maybe Vishal?
Yeah. Sony, can you repeat the question for everybody's benefit?
Yeah. So we have seen a lot of data breaches. And do the recent data breaches at major cloud service providers make you question your decision, okay, of moving? But again, that was quite, it was answered in the last couple of minutes. What I'd like to understand is what measures are organizations taking to protect enterprises against these sort of breaches?
Yeah, so it goes back to the earlier conversation we were having, and my about infrastructure security versus data security, and that whole conversation. And in my opinion, individual consumers, even large enterprises like L&T Infotech or Asian Paints and so on, have nearly zero influence on the cloud infrastructure providers or cloud service providers security direction, right? Microsoft or all of these large cloud service providers are very large, and their product decisions are taken by an aggregate of thousands of enterprises asking for something, right? My view is that trying to control the breaches of all of these cloud service providers or trying to monitor these breaches is an exercise in vain, right? Even if you detect these breaches, the time to get these infrastructure providers to make corrections so that these kind of breaches don't happen again and so on is a thing that will happen independently, right? So the large, for example, Exchange Online breach that happened, which compromised thousands of enterprises' data. Of course, Microsoft will take care of it and make sure this kind of a thing doesn't happen and so on. It's a large enterprise. Similarly, for large breaches that have happened with Amazon and other service providers. I think the enterprise has to start focusing more and more on the security of the data, so that even if there is a breach of the cloud infrastructure, that doesn't cause a breach of the data that belongs to the enterprise. I think that segregation, if an enterprise is able to bring about, that okay, your infrastructure can keep going up and down or can be breached, but that doesn't mean that my data has got compromised. If we draw a clear line around that distinction, then I think we will all be much better off.
So leading that question, we see that, and I was just reading a report recently, I think it just came out last month by another public forum. It said that 75% of cloud users suffered up to 7 malicious account takeovers in the last year itself. And while you were speaking about specifically Microsoft, I'd like to get your views on what are your current present concerns around, let's say, data in the cloud, or specifically O365 would say.
Yeah, I think the concerns might not be very different from others. I think the whole thing is that this back of the mind thought that my data is out there somewhere. It is with somebody. It's on somebody else's computer. It's on somebody else's applications, and I don't control the destiny of that data, right? So just by virtue of Microsoft's engineers or Salesforce engineers making a mistake, all my data can be compromised, and I didn't do anything. I think that continues to be a area of concern. Now, of course, the control system around that is, if that same data was in my on-premise system, would it have been better off? Would it have been less susceptible to that same data breach and so on? And I don't think, I mean, the jury is out on that question, whether that same incident would have happened to the on-premise system, simply because the cloud infrastructure provides a centralized pot of gold for hackers. Whereas when systems were on-premise, they were distributed, right? Now, large cloud service providers like Amazon or Microsoft, they are the central repository. You just have to hack into one system, and then you've got the motherload of all data that you want, right? So the stakes are much higher now than they were when things were more on-premise, where you had to go hack every enterprise system separately, and every enterprise was making a different call of how it wants to secure its infrastructure and network and so on, right? So the centralization has created a very high incentive, and to me the concern is the cloud infrastructure provider taking enough measures to secure my data? And the answer for us as a security company ourselves is that, and having looked at some of the security postures of the cloud service providers, the answer to me is no. They are better off than the controls that I would have had, on premise, but they are not good enough to prevent the breaches and the kind of incentives that people have to breach into a cloud infrastructure, right? So you have to look at the difference in incentives also for hackers to breach into something. Sure. And the answer that I come up with is no.
I'd like to get an opinion from Abhishek and Deepak as well.
Yeah, on the point of this previous point, which we're talking about the cloud breaches, I think some things which at an organization one can do is focus on the encryption strategy you have on the data which get hosted in this cloud. And if you've invested in the right technologies there, I think to a large extent you can start de-risking yourself from such breaches. And now we from our end, we're also looking at micro segmentation. How do you limit, if that, in case there's a breach, how do you limit the damage to that particular zone, or looking at the CASB technologies which are in probe. So there, some of these things, the way we would probably look at it is probably technology could really provide some sort of a de-risking mode. There could be some process related which you want to initiate. Like I remember a cloud service provider, which is not one of the big service providers, and we used to constantly ask him for getting it certified that he doesn't see any breaches, and kept him on his toes. We might not have that level of influence on the biggies there, but yeah, some process level or your legal, the way you have structured your legal agreements. Is there a way to insist on a few things whenever you have these data breaches, and can you de-risk yourself when such data breaches happen? So that was my take in terms of how do you really prepare yourself when you keep hearing. While I agree with Abhishek that you should not attribute everything to moving these data breaches to moving on the cloud, but there is always a chance that this might happen.
Abhishek, your views? Quick 20-second view. We are running late on time.
Okay, fine. Fair enough. So I think in terms of preparedness from an organization standpoint, it is more of any breach preparedness. I would not again limit it to cloud, right? And there are multiple ways, like whether you do simulations and all do all the kind of trials, make upfront and available. Whilst I agree to what Vishal mentioned, that no doubt when we're talking about the cloud service providers, definitely have they have multiple customers, they have data of multiple customers. So for an hacker, it definitely is basically the golden pot, right? He just needs to hack once and he gets everything. But on the other side, you see they also are far more, let's say maybe geared up and capable just because of the business model in terms of investments, right? I'm not talking about, let's say maybe somebody who is investing. I mean, typically in parlance, it's said that the BFSI companies invest a lot with a viz to, let's say maybe manufacturing companies or likewise, or not regulated and so on and so forth. When you see the cloud infrastructure provider or a cloud service provider, for them it is multiple customers, so they will have all the set of controls put in place. So whilst they may become basically a single source, and basically for a hacker, they also have the wherewithals and the tools and technologies which all the companies may not have. So I just gave my perspective on both the points.
Okay, thank you.
It's like robbing a house versus robbing the bank, right? The kind of people who rob houses and the kind of people who rob the bank are different people, right? They're differently equipped, and now you've got an opportunity to go rob the bank. So obviously the investment you'll make is much higher.
So the only point, Vishal, I'm making is, just like you said, house will have less controls as compared to bank.
Yeah, absolutely. The bank should have more controls. Now, to me, I mean, my answer is the bank right now doesn't have enough controls given the amount of money that they are hosting, or in their case, the data that they're hosting.
So I can actually agree with you, because I interact with quite a few clients. And while those clients are looking at putting in various initiatives by way of technology, EDR or PIM or various solutions, my point is that if someone is able to phish a legitimate user of your organization, he has the access token. He will come through all the technology that you have put in because his connection is now legitimate, irrespective of whether we have encrypted the channel or we have put in filtering rules, or let's say because it's all his token that is there is valid, right? And people are out there who are actually, let's say, phishing out these tokens, not just from end users, but from specific administrators of organizations. And to top it all, there's a process of, let's say, encrypting because of, let's say, a ransomware attack, and then data exfiltration. And that's where, if you see, most of the cases outside today are not a small hacker or a hacker group coming in. These are seasoned people who have tested their specific code on various organizations, tested in your organization, seen it work on one or two demo systems, and then a full-fledged attack comes in. And I've seen that plenty. Which is where when I ask organizations, do you have an anti-ransomware strategy in place? People don't. when they are hit by a ransomware attack, or let's say any COVID-based theme attack, their data center is compromised, their DR site is compromised, all the servers between DC and DR and the clouds, the systems which are on the cloud are also compromised, right? So that's where some of these questions I ask, and when I see a couple of CISOs are and I don't know about this, because that's where I would like to lean on CISOs and figure out, are we doing adequate when our data is now in the cloud? And especially, and when I specifically see a product like O365, while I understand it is a great product, the kind of breaches that we have witnessed in the recent past is challenging, not because the product has its issues, but probably misconfiguration of the product has related to some of these issues. So that's, while we have run out of time, I'd like to get a quick 15 seconds from each one of you. If you are telling organizations who are going to embark on the cloud, what are those three, let's say in bullet point statement or a two-worded statement you would say that they have to work towards from a security and privacy perspective?
I can go first. I would tell them to make sure that their choices of the cloud service providers are driven by security and privacy constraints also, and not only by convenience and cost. Right. So number one, security and privacy has to become a criteria in evaluation of, if you're evaluating 3 different cloud service providers, right? So that is one, because that sends a message also to the cloud service providers that, okay, security matters and you can't just go take any random product decisions, right? That is one.
Abhishek, from your side, we have really run out of time.
Okay.
So, Sonia, I would say it is all the more same. I would not see cloud as different from the on-prem infrastructure as well. So do take care of your entire enterprise security and risk management strategy while you're onboarding any of your products, whether it is cloud or otherwise.
Thank you. Dilip? I think Deepak is here. Dilip?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same for me. You stick to the 5 tenets or 5 pillars of the information security strategy, which is pretty general across multiple organizations, and it doesn't matter if you're on-prem or cloud. Cloud, definitely, there is always a balance between the convenience and experience versus the security risk. So I think one needs to be cognizant of that fact, and while evaluating it, while people are saying cloud first, also probably say cloud and security first as your strategy.
Thank you, Deepak. I think we have run out of time, but I think I'd like to thank all the dear panelists. I'm sure the insights and the experiences that you have provided, we have had different types of people on this call. We have had CISOs, we have had security consultants, we have had IT managers, general managers for technology. The kind of insights you have provided will help a number of organizations in addressing their current security and privacy challenges in their cloud adoption strategy. I'm sure they'll start looking at a cloud adoption strategy, not just looking at, let's say, performance or let's say resilience, or they'll also start looking at security and privacy to be a de facto when evaluating cloud service providers, or for that matter, not just the strategy, but moving to a cloud and continuing operations as well. With that, I thank you all for a wonderful, wonderful session. I'd like to pass it on to Anirban, because I think I've been getting a lot of ping messages from Anirban. Anirban, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sony, for wonderfully moderating this very interesting and insightful session. We'll move on to the next part of the webinar. We will now like to invite Mr. Prakash Srinivasan, who is the Senior Consultant at Secular Technology, for giving us some insights about the launch story.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Anirban. I would like to share my screen to take you through the launch story. Here we go.
Prakash, sorry, just before you begin, my bad. I would request the audience present to sort of not ask questions during Mr. Srinivasan's presentation. Please key in your questions at the question and answer box that's at the right-hand side of your panel. We will have time for Q&A post his session. Over to you, Prakash, again.
Thanks, Anirban. Thanks, panelists, for your insights and really great ideas coming through. And it's no surprise that some of those ideas find their way into this launch story. So what we'll be talking about today is Secur's offering for Microsoft 365. We'll be focusing majorly towards automatic protection and seamless access of secure content from Microsoft 365. Just a backstory towards this, right? Last 1.5 years have been the new normal now. And like most of the panelists mentioned, initially on-premise was really good. And then the moment COVID hit, many of the organizations had to jump towards adopting cloud applications, cloud environments. And Teams became very popular. And so Teams, as of now, is everywhere. And as a result, enterprise data is everywhere as well. There was a storm which everybody was riding. And so everybody had this opinion of let's make sure everybody is connected to remote and let's figure out security a little later, because what's more critical is access. And so there is enterprise data across the world, right? Because of Teams, enterprise data has made its way through mobiles, desktops, tablets, managed and unmanaged devices, inside and outside the enterprise boundary. Over the recent few months, there is a push to also use Teams for external collaboration. And so it basically means that sensitive enterprise data is now also on partners, vendors, consultants, all those systems. And last but not the least, there is a need to comply to regulations, be it global or local. And now is when organizations are waking up to the fact that, yes, the first phase, which is giving access to everyone, has been completed, but we need to make sure that we need to comply to the security and privacy regulations. And they have become risks for cloud adoption. That's what is being observed across enterprises since they have moved to the cloud. And so let's take this opportunity to talk about what are the entire umbrella of offerings of Secure under the Microsoft 365 offering. And to start with the basic form of protection, it could be the simple protection on desktop. A user could just right click on a file and say, I want to secure this document. Or it could be automated through any discovery solution. And protection on desktop forms a core capability of security. But moving forward in the food chain, email protection can be user-driven or automated, and that's supported by Secure. All a user really needs to do is click on one button, and the email which is sent out is secured. Let's look at this at the perspective of the Exchange Online breach which happened a few months ago. What we have come up recently over the last year and a half is riding the tide of cloud adoption through securing the productivity and collaboration apps, automatic security when documents are uploaded into SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams, and seamless access from Teams. And we'll be focusing on Teams a little bit more because that's become office for most of us. There is security of mobile data sharing through Secure for Intune. And to tie it all together, identity and access management. With Secure's Federation of Identity, all the users need to do is use their Microsoft 365 or the Azure identity and be able to protect and consume documents. Let's focus on Secure for Teams specifically. In our recent product release, what we have done is made available seamless access of protected documents directly from Teams. And we are the only provider to do that. Documents get automatically protected as soon as they get into the O365 platform, which means that they remain secure inside O365. So if the responsibility of securing the data is with the enterprise, this is the solution. And with this release, what Secure enables end users to do is seamlessly access protected documents right off Teams. Click on the file, open it in your Microsoft Office, edit it and save it back, and everything is completely seamless. This works across different applications of Teams, be it on the desktop, be it on the web. And a single sign-on with Azure Identity makes it very, very seamless. The major benefit here is basically being head-to-head alongside Teams. While Teams becomes the greatest growing enterprise collaboration tool, Secure helps to make sure that the data which goes in remains secure all the way. So the major benefits across the three risks is Microsoft Teams is everywhere. and so is data. But with Secure, the data is also secure. The data is secure as soon as it reaches the cloud, and so wherever the data goes, it remains secure. There is seamless access through external collaboration. Because Secure not only works with the Microsoft platform, but it is extendable to any platform. External collaboration, be the external agency with Microsoft or not, there is seamless access. Not only that, there is instant revoke of permission, which basically means that project is over, interaction is complete, revoke access instantaneously. And the third, and obviously not the least, is compliance to privacy regulation. With Secure, there is granular access control. There is forensic data analysis, which means that there is clear understanding of who has accessed the data, what they have done with it, when they did it. And this also helps to revoke and control access whenever needed. Now, the most common question which comes to any CIO, CISO's mind is, I have a subscription already with Microsoft 365 and I also get something which they provide. Why would you want to go with Secure? And these are major points just to understand the difference in the capability. First being flexibility of deployment. Secure works for on cloud as well as on premises, which basically means that even though you have moved to the cloud, you can still retain control by either having Secure on the cloud or have Secure on premises, and it will work with Microsoft 365. There is automation of protection as the data goes into the cloud, which basically means that the data is secure inside the cloud. It doesn't have to be secure outside because it's getting secure as soon as it gets into the cloud, and it remains secure wherever it goes. There is policy federation capability, which ensures that as soon as the permissions in the cloud changes, wherever the data is in the world, downloaded, stored, archived, the permissions get dynamically updated. You compare that with Microsoft, it's all static security. The fact that Secure is not tied to any platform and works with any operating system, any file format, repositories, email infrastructure makes it easily adoptable to organizations. It doesn't have to be dependent on the Microsoft system. Even though organizations are adopting Microsoft, that's usually not the only platform they are on. Not only that, whenever there is an interaction with an external agency, be it a vendor or a partner or a consultant, there is no guarantee that they would be on the Microsoft setup also. And so this helps external collaboration. This helps seamlessness in access. And last but not the least is the security of the security system. And I think all of us would appreciate the fact that with keys and content being together, there is a major threat of data security in the AIP offering. There are published methods to hack. Google, you will find out there are ways published by universities where it's easier to just hack the Microsoft document. Compared to that, Secure has regular external VAPT, which are validated by external agencies to talk about how secure it is. There is a secure online editor, which is completely agentless access for content which is Microsoft related or non-Microsoft applications. There's no need to have an agent, but access it online in a secure manner. Compare that with a Microsoft online viewer. Once it is online, all the security is off. These are just simple comparison points, and there are many, many more which we can talk about in more detail. I'll invite you to visit the Secure website to get more details about this launch story, the benefits. And if you'd like to have a conversation and also talk about these capabilities, please write to info@secure.com. Thanks for listening in.
Thank you so much, Prakash, for taking us through that particular launch story and sort of making us and the audience aware of the possibilities with Secure. We are now open for a Q&A session. While we wait for the audience to key in their questions, let me sort of ask Prakash some questions that have been sort of bubbling in my mind when you were making the presentation. Does Secure from Microsoft 365 also work with Secure Policy Server on-premise?
Absolutely. The secular policy server can be on-premise or on cloud. It works.
Okay. So moving on, if a user has secure protected file open in a native desktop app and the permissions are changed in SharePoint while the file is open, does Secure periodically check for permission changes for open files, or are permissions only validated upon when the file is opening?
The permissions are validated at the time of file open. So every time there is a file open happening, there is a real-time check on what the user's permissions are on that file. Say, for example, I download a document and I open it, uh, and I have a downloaded copy on my machine. And then I move to a different role, my permissions in SharePoint change. The next time I try to open that downloaded copy, I will not have access because I do not have permissions in SharePoint anymore. It's completely real time and it's automatic.
I think we have a couple of questions coming in. Is it possible to set time and date-based expiration of document access rights in SharePoint?
So with SharePoint, because the Seclore's offering for SharePoint is based on real time, all you need to do is set the permissions in SharePoint and Seclore will just pick it up from there. So there's no real need to set up two different times, two different set of permissions. It's a single source of truth.
Okay, and last but not the least, if a file is IRM protected at the desktop and then uploaded to SharePoint, how do then the permissions work?
So at the time of IRM protection at the desktop, the users will define what will be the policy of protection. And the promise with Seclore is that whatever is the security that is applied on the document, that remains with the file wherever it goes. So we make sure that the security that is defined at the time of protection remains, even if the file goes to SharePoint or any other platform.
I think we've come to an end of the questions, but I guess there are many people who would want to get into a one-on-one conversation with the Seclore team to understand more about their products. With that, we've come to the end of very exciting webinar and session. I would now like to again request the audience to fill in the quick survey post this session, where you are eligible to win exciting prizes worth $100. For more such webinars, this is Anirban Ghoshal signing off. Stay healthy, stay safe.